Good evening. I'm Bee Fear, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Martha's Vineyard, I would like to welcome you to our virtual candidates forum for the Tisbury special election for one seat on the select board. I want to remind the viewers that the special election is January 24th, and then the annual election will be on May 9th. I have with me candidates Abby Burt, Bruce Campbell, Christina Colarusso, and Donald Rose. Also on the screen behind the various symbols is Alan Strahler, who's the host for the league, Shavana Anderson, who's with MVTV, and Kathy Laskowski, who is the league forum coordinator and will be playing back up to me in case I lose power. Each candidate will start with a 3-minute introduction, and then I will ask some questions of you all that have been submitted by the public. And please keep your responses to about a minute, as we have a lot of ground to cover. Okay, let's get going. Ms. Burt, can we start with you, and will you start us off with your introductory remarks?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Abby Burt here. And I'd like to share my background, introduce myself. I'm a 12th generation Islander who moved here full-time after summers in 1974. My business experience was working for the town of West Tisbury for several years, followed by about a dozen years with Cronin's Real Estate, 3 years with the Sheriff's Meadow Foundation, and 7 years running the Black Dog Tall Ships office. The last 2 jobs were office manager, bookkeeper. My municipal experience started in 74 in West Tisbury, working for the Board of Selectmen as executive secretary and for the town of West Tisbury as town accountant. I followed that with 6 or 7 years on the finance committee in West Tisbury, partially as the chairman, and was part of the movement in the late 90s, around 2000, to do something about affordable housing on the vineyard. So I started with the West Tisbury Housing Committee, and when I moved to Vineyard Haven in 2002, I got the Housing Committee going again in Tisbury. It wasn't active at that time. I managed the Community Preservation Act movement in 2005, island-wide, all 6 towns. We got it passed, and also a housing bank, which didn't pass at the state at that time. I am on the Tisbury Housing Committee, as I mentioned, and the Tisbury Community Preservation Act Committee at present. And those are, I'd like to contribute my business and municipal experience to the Board of Selectmen in Tisbury. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Campbell, can we get your introduction, please?
Yeah, I've been here since 66. I've been on the Tisbury Finance Committee, and I was chairman of the Police Advisory Committee, and I ran Campbell Oil, and I also ran the Potty Boat Ranger out of Oak Bluff for 11 years. And then I ran an ocean-going tug for the Army Corps of Engineers. And then I ran a company in Texas. And then I got old enough to retire.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso, do you want to go next, please? And unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this candidates forum. Growing up, I always loved swimming, biking, and having fun in this paradise we're lucky to call home. But I gradually realized that I was actually happiest when I was doing things for other people, doing things to protect our water, oceans, and beaches. Acts of service have provided me with a deeper happiness that has stayed with me. I knew that no matter what path I chose in life, I wanted service to be the foundation. I'm a proud member of the Merchant Marine and spent 5 years at sea as an officer and marine engineer. Since moving to the island full-time over 10 years ago, I have tried to give back to the community and volunteer in different capacities. In addition to donating my time firefighting and teaching youth swim lessons, I was particularly interested in volunteering on town committees and was appointed to the Department of Public Works Advisory Board and Wastewater Planning Committee, both of which have been disbanded or absorbed by another board. In 2016, I became a certified water and wastewater operator and still actively hold a grade 4 municipal wastewater license and a very small systems water license. I most recently served on the Sewer Advisory Board and held the position of chair. One of the accomplishments we achieved was updating the rules and regulations to strengthen the wastewater department's ability to enforce best practices and legal compliance. During COVID, I served as a supply officer for the Martha's Vineyard Emergency Management Directors Association. I was responsible for the distribution of personal protective equipment island-wide for all first responders. I was the Tisbury Emergency Management Director and drafted the comprehensive emergency plan. I understand state procurement laws, town budgets, and have applied for and won grants. I love the town of Tisbury and I'm here for the long haul. I am lucky my parents purchased land in the 80s and finally built in 2000. I have been here seasonally ever since, moving over full time after I graduated from Massachusetts Maritime Academy in 2012. Tisbury has come a long way, making more improvements each year, but still certain areas need attention and long-term capital improvements need to be addressed, especially flooding, climate change issues, and everything that's going on at Five Corners. Two areas that are important include transparency and communication, both of which could be improved upon. In particular, townwide calendar usage for all committees and boards. I am a leader who is hardworking and dedicated. I like to innovate and streamline operations to increase productivity. Government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people. It would be my honor to represent you and your voice as a member of the Tisbury Select Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Rose.
Hi, good evening to everybody. I'm recently retired from a law enforcement career, which began in 1977 with the New Bedford Police Department. I decided to relocate to Martha's Vineyard in 1988, simply because it was a better place to raise a family. I have owned my own home here in Tisbury since 1992. When I moved here, I left law enforcement for a short period of time and worked in the transportation business, starting with Elder Services of Cape Cod and the Islands, where I used to operate the elderly and handicapped transportation service called the Lift. Worked there for about 8 years, serving the senior and disabled community. I decided to go back into law enforcement with the sheriff's office in around 2000 and continued working with the senior community, developing and delivering programs to the community such as Project Lifesaver, which I brought to this island myself. We Have Your Number, which are the small red signs for an ambulance to find your home quickly in need. Did these programs through what we called Triad, which was an organization that brought together law enforcement, senior citizens, and service providers. And we met with senior citizens monthly to discuss issues that concerned them. Through the sheriff's office, I rose through the ranks and became major and was promoted and made the assistant deputy superintendent in charge of the daily operations of the jail, which is what I did for a few years before I retired. My supervisory skills are well documented with the sheriff's office. I spent many years as an instructor with the Municipal Police Training Council and the Massachusetts Sheriff's Association Education and Training Committee, I was a faculty member there. Most of the classes that I've done were all law enforcement related, but a lot of them were dedicated especially to effective communications, which is strangely enough, when you speak to anybody around the town, they seem to find that that's the biggest problem area they're concerned with, is communications between the town and the residents. So I think my skills in effective communications would be very helpful. I don't claim to be an expert at anything or have all of the answers, and I believe you should be wary of anybody who says they do have all the answers. But what I do claim is that I will work hard for the town to find the answers that are needed. I will work with those concerned in specific areas that I may not be that familiar with. And I'm not afraid to speak on major issues such as Beach Road Weekend, which scares some people off, or the Tisbury School. Those issues I have no problem discussing. What's important is, as selectman, I will be accessible and available. After being retired for 4 years now, it's time for me to lend my voice as a proven leader, a senior community advocate, and positive influence, and my intention is to do everything in my power to move Tisbury forward. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to the questions. Mr. Campbell, I'll start with you on this first one, but everybody will get a shot at it. Historically, the town of Tisbury has been the year-round port of entry for vessels, merchandise, and commercial trade. The downtown geographical area has limited space for growth and density. How do you see this as a challenge for the future, considering traffic, parking, wastewater, view sheds, and property values?
Well, I think we have some serious issues on parking. And at some point, we have to perhaps look at the idea of charging for parking. I think as far as density, it's pretty much built out. I don't think there's much more room for growth in Vineyard Haven. But we seem to be doing all right.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, do you have a comment about the port of entry issues?
There's not much really that can be said right now on that issue, because as the gentleman said, space is, you can't increase the space. Parking is limited. It's always going to be limited. I think it's just about management. As long as we manage effectively what we currently have, we should be all right for the future.
Thank you. And Ms. Colarusso, do you have any comments on this?
I know there's been a lot of discussion regarding traffic in the downtown area recently on some of the committees and boards, and encouraging people to use the park and ride, and then potentially utilizing that parking lot that is a pay for parking lot right next to Cumberland Farms. It's an ongoing problem where businesses are struggling with, people can't get a spot, and then they just, maybe they'll go to another town. So it's something that's on my mind. Thank you.
Ms. Bird?
Well, I think Vineyard Haven has one of the most beautiful harbors on the New England coast. And I think it's important to be thoughtful about how we handle the entry, which could be much more attractive looking. And that would be one of my interests, and how the traffic is handled, especially all the traffic which is generated by the boats, is a lot of the issue. So I think there needs to be yet more thoughtful deliberation about these issues.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso, you mentioned climate change in your opening remarks. What role should the town government play in planning for and responding to climate change and to sea level rise? And what specific steps would you advocate the town take?
In the Merchant Marine, we have a saying, and it's, if you have three is two, two is one is none. And our infrastructure could really be improved on with resiliency. We're not poised for where we would be if we had a big storm come our way. It would be an eye opener for a lot of our buildings and infrastructure, including shelters and all that. When it comes to climate change, we need to have open communication with the Martha's Vineyard Commission, with the new positions they've just created to help with the planning of our energy and efforts island-wide.
Thank you. Mr. Rose? What
Climate change.
steps do you think the town should take?
I think the town should be involved in any aspect that addresses climate change. Because as people sit there and say, how do we prepare for a major storm if it comes? Well, I think we're beyond that now. If you look at the rest of the world, I think that major storm is probably going to come, and we probably need to prepare for it earlier than later. We have now some conditions where we see roads washed out, not even with that big giant storm that everybody's worried about. The flooding at Five Corners and down Beach Road is uncontrollable at this point. It affects the gas station. It affects businesses along that area. Eventually, we're going to be sitting at a meeting talking once again about building a new drawbridge. Only this time it's going to have to be a mile long. So if we're not concerned about climate control now in any aspect, no matter how we can improve, then we're making a big mistake.
And Ms. Burt, what role do you think the town should have in planning, and what steps should the town take?
Well, I agree with the others, actually. Obviously, we need to have a team effort here, town-wise and island-wise, with various, what shall I say, points of our existence here. One of the primary ones, obviously, is Five Corners, because when Five Corners is washed out, people cannot get to and from the boat, even when it is running. So we need to coordinate, shall I say, and have plans in the event of a major storm.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
I think that, climate issues are there, and we really don't have a lot of power to do much about it. What I would think we might do is aggressively start using solar power to alleviate some of the pollution aspects of fossil fuel heating. As to the Five Corners, that's been something that we've looked at for 50 years, and nothing's been done. And the state just spent multiple millions of dollars doing Beach Road over and didn't choose to elevate it, which to me seems ludicrous, but the state in its wisdom does what it does. And we'll have to live with that.
So, Mr. Campbell, you mentioned solar power. How do you think the town should max out the possibility of solar power in Tisbury? And what would be your plans to provide more EV chargers, since Chronix has now removed them?
I wasn't aware that Chronix had removed them. When did that happen?
That's a question that I received from a Tisbury voter. I'm not certain about the accuracy of that or not.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't either. The whole principle of those awnings that Chronix built was, in fact, to put those charges at the base. But that's one issue. The other one that you spoke about is we have many buildings that could, in fact, be retrofitted with solar panels. And I would hope that we would look at that and see if we can't max out some of those roofs.
Ms. Burt, do you have any comment about solar power?
I didn't know about Chronix either, and
I should have double checked that before I let it stand as a question. I may be wrong about it.
I do know it's expensive. I know a few people that have installed them in their own homes, and that's very expensive. As far as the municipal goes, it's like a savings account. I think that as we go about maintaining, let alone building new in Tisbury, we need to start budgeting for transferring to solar. I think that's an excellent idea.
And Ms. Colarusso?
With regards to solar, I have applied for it myself several times with the airport for different rounds of the CVEC. But then in the latest round, the developer decided not to go forward with the project. So there are challenges with utilizing the CVEC, the Cape and Vineyard Electrical Co-ops program. The other thing that I just went forward with was called Eversource's Make Ready program, which Eversource will pay for all the electrical conduit installation, and all the municipality has to do is buy the electrical charging pedestal. And then Eversource pays for the hooking it up. So that's something that we could be looking into as soon as next week.
Thank you. Mr. Rose?
Well, the only thing I'd like to add to that is that I understand that there are a lot of places who apply, or a lot of people who apply for those programs, and then they're told that there's too much tree cover on their house. So tree removal now becomes an issue for them, and that's an expensive thing to deal with also, is tree removal. So if we can find a way into these programs that assist, also find somebody that can assist on the tree removal aspect, so some other people who won't be allowed to have the programs will now be allowed to have the programs.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears now and turn to affordable housing. What steps should the town take to improve and support the development of affordable and workforce housing? And be as specific about the town action as we possibly can. Mr. Rose, I'll start with you this time.
All right. That's an issue that's been ongoing for quite a while and probably will continue. I understand that, and again, I'm not an expert at this, so I would look forward to discussing it with people who know about these issues. I understand that Nantucket has been doing some wonderful things in this area, so I don't see why we can't speak to them or find out what they're doing or see how it could affect us. I do believe that the town needs to take an initiative in providing or trying to provide housing. This term affordable housing has bothered me since day one, because I know of people who apply for affordable housing and they're either told that they make too much money, or they don't make enough money, or they're not eligible for affordable housing. So instead of using the term affordable housing, I like to gear it more towards what you said, workforce housing, so that we can take care of the people who live in this town. Families are leaving faster than they've ever left before. So it's not just about the workforce. It's not just about municipal housing. I'm concerned with the families also. But yes, I think the town should take an initiative and figure out a way to get involved deeply in this, so we can stop this mass exit of wonderful island families.
Ms. Bird, I know this is a subject you've been thinking about a lot. What are your comments?
Well, I kind of dedicated the last 20 years of my municipal life to this subject, and Tisbury has done as much as we've been able to do so far, because it almost always comes down to money. It always comes down to money. The town has paid for units on rental units, like on Lake Street. We've erected home ownership units, like off 4 houses on Lambert's Cove Road, and various other places around town. The main impetus, we have lots of ideas at the Tisbury Housing Committee, and we know exactly what Nantucket does, and we've listened to their tapes, and we've listened to Island Housing Trust about different ways that we can handle diverse housing in Tisbury and all the other towns. In every case, it takes money. And the Community Preservation Act, I'm happy to say, I've pushed for using at least 50% of our money every year toward housing initiatives in Tisbury. And we've continually given to it. The last big one was Kuhn's Way, which just opened this fall. We gave almost $1 million. The town of Tisbury gave almost $1 million over 5 different years to that project. So we have participated when finances allowed us. We have ideas, and we have most importantly, we have a warrant article on this year's warrant for a position, part-time probably, of housing advocate, a coordinator, whatever you want to call it, to help us coordinate with all of the other island towns. It may be a position that can be more than one town, to pull together even more specific or effective programs. The real way it's going to become more diverse is when that housing bank, if and when that housing bank ever gets passed. Otherwise, we're scraping and crawling every year to get money for housing. And I agree with Mr. Rose. I've always called it community housing, because it isn't just one class. It's everybody in this town that makes it diverse and whole and healthy. So I support all kinds of people being eligible for housing.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso?
I have 2 areas I wanted to touch upon that my colleagues, I agree with most of what my colleagues have said. I just wanted to touch on 2 different things. Incentivizing accessory apartments, and then as well as in the town of Provincetown, they offer a residential exemption for a tax break for anyone that rents to a year-round basis to a year-round person. I think that's something that we could look into to help keep some of these empty homes an incentive, so that people don't keep their homes empty year-round and might consider renting to someone year-round.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Campbell, do you have anything to add on the issue of housing?
Yeah, 2 things. One is we've got to address zoning.
Yep.
We can change zoning to allow multi-unit housing to be built. And 2, we've got to address the sewage treatment issue. We've got to expand the treatment facilities so that, in fact, if you do build these new units, there's a treatment plant available to handle the waste.
Thank you. You mentioned a change in zoning. That would be under the jurisdiction of initiative of the planning board. How do you think the select board and the planning board should interact on this and other subjects? Should they be completely independent? Should there be regular meetings? What do you think of the relationship between the select board and the planning board, Mr. Campbell?
I think that there's got to be a dialogue, because you can't do this without a combined effort. It is a major issue. We've got to make available the ability to build affordable housing in Tisbury. By affordable, I mean multiple units that can be rented to people who can rent them. It isn't critical that people own everything. If we had enough rental stock in Tisbury, it would take a lot of the pressure off of being able to live here. My daughter's a teacher in West Tisbury. She and her mates cannot afford to live here. They commute. You can't sustain a community when you've got to get on a boat to get over here at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning and leave at 4 o'clock. It's very disruptive.
And Mr. Rose, how do you think the select board and the planning board should interact?
Well, again, I agree. I think there should be constant communications. Again, it brings us back to that same effective communication issue. And there has to be pressure put to make some of these changes that we need to make. People worry about putting pressure on people. Well, you can't get a diamond without putting pressure. So putting pressure on people is not a big deal. So as long as you keep that communication going and you stay on top of it, again, it's not about affordable housing. It's about, as it was stated earlier, it's about reasonable apartments. It's about available housing. How about using the term available housing? Because sometimes those places aren't even there. So we have to look at every single side of this and attack it directly.
And Ms. Colarusso, what do you think about the relationship between the select board and the planning board and how that should be worked out?
I think open communication, open dialogue, maybe quarterly joint meetings, official joint meetings, or if that's not enough, maybe more frequent than that. And just making sure that we are on the same page, especially now with the master plan being created. I think things will be more streamlined going forward for the town.
And Ms. Bird?
Well, the select board needs to support the housing committee and the planning board committee, especially with administrative help and other help. They're both volunteer committees, and the housing committee has trouble. Right now, we're down 2 members who have had to leave for various reasons, and we need more help, volunteers throughout the town, I think, to sort of join the Tisbury town team and help affect some of these changes. There is a planning board member on our housing committee right now, and the housing committee has asked the planning board multiple times about residential exemptions, as you mentioned, and multiple dwellings. For some reason, we're still waiting for some of these suggestions to come to fruition and to come to a vote and get the zoning changed. I'd like to hopefully see that.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso, you mentioned the Martha's Vineyard Commission. Do you think the town takes full advantage of the services provided by the commission? And if not, what more should they do?
One program in particular that the town pays into is the ArcGIS software. And we could be utilizing that for a lot of different things, including personnel in the community that are on a high risk that might need to be checked in on after a storm. You could even be utilizing it for inputting the pipes of water and sewer locations so that we don't have any problems with dig safe or anything like that. It's just a program and a software that the commission is the master, or like is the liaison for, that we could be utilizing more. I know the police department does use it, but other departments in town could be, such as water and wastewater. You can even take pictures and upload it so that you would have historical data, just like with Beach Road where the pipes were ended up being scheduled 20. Utilizing this sort of software would have prevented that debacle.
Thank you. And Mr. Rose, how do you think the town should take advantage of the commission?
Well, again, I'm not as familiar with it as I should be at the moment, but there are some issues involving the Martha's Vineyard Commission that do concern me. I know of a case involving the Bristol House on West Trop that was discussed about renovations or rebuilds. My question about that, with my limited knowledge, is that I was under the impression that it may be out of their jurisdiction. In fact, if it was a property from the West Trop Association or Historical Association, why was it set out now to the Martha's Vineyard Commission to make a decision on that? So there are some questions that I have regarding that. So I'd have to hold back on my answers until I found out a little bit more information.
Thank you. And Ms. Bird, what do you think the town should do in terms of relationship with the commission?
Well, I think the select board should have an active coordination with the Tisbury elected officials on the MBC. I haven't noticed any in the select board meetings I've been zooming in on. I have not noticed anything about that. In fact, I have to admit, I don't know who the current one or two representatives are. I think the select board needs to show some leadership and opinions and coordinate better and communicate better with our representative.
There's an issue that's been lively in discussion in the newspapers recently, which has to do with the use of the Catherine Cornell Theater. I'd like to ask each of you what you think should be done, and should the Catherine Cornell Theater be turned back into a theater, or should it be continue to be used as office space? Mr. Campbell, I'll start with you.
Well, I don't fully understand what's going on, why they're taking a public space and making it sort of private executive offices. And I'm sure the pandemic certainly put a kibosh on the public use. But the Cornell Foundation that did it over with the intent that it would be used as a public gathering place. And it should remain so.
And Ms. Colarusso, what do you feel about the Catherine Cornell Theater?
For me, I would want to see more clarity on the stipulations of the original donation to make sure that we are in compliance with the intentions of the original donation. I can see both sides of this issue, and all I can say is think about everything that happened with the annex. It was supposed to be temporary, and then it basically just became permanent. And we don't want to set that precedence here possibly, or maybe we need to look at this in a larger scope of our capital improvements and implementing better facilities for our people.
And Ms. Burt?
Well, I understand that the use of the Catherine Cornell first started because of COVID and 2 extra people working on the lower level. And I fully believe the Catherine Cornell should be used for a public space with the stage for which it was intended and given. Having said that, a top priority, I believe, in the town is the town hall's situation. And it needs to be looked into rapidly. Whether another spot needs to be rented and or how we proceed with a town hall that will put all of our people in one building. These are important issues that need to be addressed.
And Mr. Rose?
Yes, I totally agree. I believe that the Catherine Cornell Theater should be used for its intended purpose. But I also understand that under circumstances like COVID, things that we have no control over, we have to make difficult decisions. So the decisions that they made at the time based on COVID-related issues, I understand, and I don't have an issue with it. And I think the general public would also understand and not have an issue with it, as long as a temporary situation remains temporary. So yes, we need leadership to address this, to make sure that we're either making a decision or a determination based on how we're using it now or how we're going to use it in the future, but make it clear that we want it to remain for its intended purpose. And now let's take a step further to find out how to fix the issues we have now.
Thank you. I'm going to turn now to some issues around cooperation among the communities. Do you think there should be more scheduled interaction with all the communities on the island for the purpose of working on mutual goals? And should we be talking more about regionalization? And specifically, one issue is, what do you think of the possibility of cross-connecting the 3 Down Island sewage treatment plants? Ms. Burt?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, I would like to see more island-wide meetings of similar committees from the up island, down island towns as needed. I think that is important, very important. Very important. And for financial reasons and for efficiency reasons. But I can't remember the second half of your
Whether, I'm just curious, one of the issues that was brought up to me was the possibility of cross-connecting the 3 Down Island sewage treatment plants.
Oh,
And
yeah,
It came up earlier in this discussion that sewage treatment is one of the issues that's holding affordable community housing back. And
it's important to regionalize, to use regionalization in some cases for sure, I believe, on the island, whether it's sewage or emergency services, as have been mentioned in the news. I believe it's important to
thank you.
have more
Ms.
meetings.
Colarusso? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Finished.
Okay, Ms. Colarusso?
The price tag to interconnect those would be so astronomical due to their distances from one another. That being said, the idea of satellite package plants being installed in different communities of high density, that might be something, or expansion of individual sewers as they are, as long as the plants can be upgraded. When you look at the history of how it all came to be, it is unfortunate that the plants were potentially purposely built to be small, to curtail growth rather than using zoning. And the other thing was the hospital deactivated a wastewater treatment plant that they had there and tied into the OB sewer. When you think about how we get to where we want to be, you do have to look back at maybe these small missteps and think about best practices. When it comes to collaborating with other towns, I'm all for it. Communication is key. In my roles, in the jobs I've had, I've always tried to network with the other communities, whether it be for rules and regulations, adopting similar policies, or organizing island-wide training for water and wastewater operators, as well as DPW training for OSHA. And regionalization is obviously a hot topic and a buzzword that some people don't like to talk about. But if anything, COVID showed us where we are deficient as an island-wide community and where it might be easier to streamline communications and turning things into a proper chain of command.
Thank you. And Mr. Rose, can you talk a little bit about your thoughts about regionalization?
Yeah, again, like Ms. Colarusso just said, regionalizing seems to be a dirty word to some folks. I don't know what they're thinking when they hear the word, but we do have to speak to one another. We can't discuss water treatment issues and a half a mile down the road, they have different issues. You know, they have the same issues. Shellfish issues in our waters, shellfish issues in Oak Bluff's waters. Trash removal. There are certain things that we all do, each town, and whether you call it regionalization or not, we should work together to find the same solution that affects this entire island. If we have one town on the island that successfully moves forward and 5 towns that do not, we're not doing anything for our vineyard. So yes, regionalization is not a bad thing. It's not going to work on everything, but it should be discussed in many of the issues that we deal with.
Thank you. And Mr. Campbell?
I think it's long overdue. And I think that the naysayers who don't like the word regionalization have either died or gone to Florida. They're not here anymore. The realities are that we cannot sustain the situation of 6 police chiefs, 6 fire chiefs, EMTs. We've got to combine some of these services, or we're gonna croak. The tax rate in Tisbury already is on the precipice of being unbearable. And until we get that under control, and the only way to get it under control is to regionalize some of these services. I would like to
Thank you.
make another comment.
Oh,
And
go ahead. Yeah.
had to leave for a moment, and that's the commission.
Oh, thank you. I should have brought you back in. I'm sorry.
That's right. I was on the 2nd generation elected to the commission. And at the time, we were heady with what the power was that the legislature had given us. And we probably exceeded the ability of the island to grapple with what we'd done, which is deny the steamship authority that second slip in Vineyard Haven. Many of you who are still alive and around realize what happened, that the powers that be in Tisbury drove the commission out, and it was a very unpleasant time. And the residents of the island got together and figured out that, well, we'll give it another try. Well, it's been a long time, and I think that the commission, again, is headed God knows where, but it cannot sustain the legal bills that they're going to encourage and encounter with doing the things they're doing. And I hope they hear what I'm saying. Thank you.
I hope they're listening.
So do I.
I'm wondering if any of you have been participating in the master plan forums that are being conducted by the Master Plan Steering Committee. And if you have, what is your opinion of the direction in which they're moving and what you know about them? Ms. Bird?
Well, I know that it's about done and ready to be presented, so I'm looking forward to this. I'm just hoping, because there have been previous master plans for Tisbury and different plans done by the MVC plans. And I'm hoping this time it will drive to some direct action in the specific areas that it mentions. The planning is great. I would like to see specific action come out of it that will benefit our town of Tisbury.
And Ms. Colarusso?
I was able to attend one of the sessions in the very beginning, but then was not able to attend any others. But I was excited for the town and looking forward to the progress that the rest of the committee made.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, have you participated in the master plan forums?
No, I seem to be on page with the rest of them. I have not participated yet, but I'm certainly thrilled at the aspect, and I hope something positive comes from it.
And Mr. Campbell?
Well, the master plan, if it is talking about Tisbury, it doesn't look at planning with the other down island towns, it's not going anywhere. And I think that unless we get some discussion with the other towns about what a real master plan is going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years, it's not going anywhere.
Thank you. One question I received was, what should we do to modernize the street lighting system in Tisbury? Where shall I start? Mr. Campbell, you want to talk about street lighting?
Yeah, I do. I think it's appalling. I think when you look at some of the lighting fixtures that are out there, some of them date to 1950. And we haven't really done anything on Franklin Street for the past 50 years that I've been here. And yet the population has moved out there, dramatically from the time when I got here. So I think we could certainly do one, an inventory of what's there, and two, go to Eversource and find out what it actually costs per streetlight and figure out how we can in fact light this town without going bankrupt. The other thing is it's critical that we do some lighting at 5 corners and make it daylight 24/7. It's the highest incident rate of fatalities in Tisbury at 5 corners.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, do you have any comments about street lighting?
No, I do not. I don't understand what's necessary for that, so I would like to look into that and find out more. The electric company should help with that. I don't know what the cost would be, but it's certainly something we need to look at.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso?
I agree with what both of the other candidates said. I do notice a lot more people walking on Franklin Street late at night, and it is pretty dim. Not familiar with the fixtures in particular. I'd have to go look at them to get a better understanding of and I also didn't know if they might be replacing any fixtures downtown as part of the Main Street bump out project, or if lights were not included in the project.
Thank you. Ms. Britt?
I'd like to find out more about that Main Street project and also grants, et cetera, that might help mitigate the cost of lights, because I can certainly tell in the last 20 years, they've reduced the number of street lights in my neighborhood and around town. And I wonder if that was a cost saving or if they're old fixtures, or what we could do to improve that situation.
I'm going to ask you now all about how you feel about the current select board, and have they been effective? And if you think yes, in what respects and what goals have they reached and accomplished? And if no, what specific improvements would you make to move projects from concept to implementation? Mr. Rose?
I don't know the gentlemen that well that are on the select board right now, but what I can tell you is based on things that I've heard from the community. And again, I will bring it back to effective communications. We just got through hearing about the downtown project with the sidewalks and such. I heard from several business people downtown who had concerns, and most of the concerns were that if I knew when they were going to be in front of my store, I could have prepared better. I could have closed for Christmas on certain days when I wanted to be open, but I didn't understand the plan. Now, I don't want to blame the select board for how they handled that, because I understand the town did announce that the information was on their website. So I went ahead myself and I looked on the website. And to be honest with you, you had to be an engineer to understand some of what was printed out. So that wasn't effective for the business owners downtown. So I think what I would add to the board would be my effective communication skills. And I would take projects such as this and personally go and speak to folks. I don't want people coming to me a week after a decision was made and say that it was the first time they heard about it. If it affected them, they should have been involved early. I don't know how many meetings were held with the Tisbury Business Association over that, but it's issues like that where I think it was such a small town compared to a city that it's not difficult for myself or another to take a walk downtown and to speak to these folks, to take a walk down to the harbor and speak to people down there. So I think the communication side of it is going to be the biggest issue that I can change immediately and long term.
Thank you. Ms. Burt?
I think that the current board of two now is new. I know one of the members is, this is his first term, so he's only been on half of a year, and the other fellow a year. So it's not somebody that, it's not a board that has a member, and now there's going to be a new member. And it's not a board that's had a lot of long-term leadership or institutional knowledge. And that has not really helped them. They've depended a lot on the town manager. And I think the board needs to meet more often, like every week instead of once or twice a month, and have more input and interchange with each other and the public. It's had to been Zoom, but I understand that by March wouldn't need to be that anymore, so they can meet in public and there can be more back and forth with the citizens. I think that there has to be more cooperation and information between the DPW, which has a lot to do with these town projects, and the Tisbury Business Association, and the Board of Selectmen, knowing what's going to be going on around town. And that's all, again, communication, and there needs to be a lot more of it in town, I believe.
Thank you. And Mr. Campbell, what improvements would you make to strengthen the Board of Selectmen's productivity?
So I think that the prior speakers have covered the ground a lot. I think that it's systemic of the problems we have in Tisbury. We had a DPW committee that was independently elected that had a good handle on running the DPW. And the wisdom of the selectmen decided to abolish it and take over that responsibility themselves. Well, I think that decision was wrong. And the proof of the pudding is some of the complaints that have been mentioned around what was going on with the Main Street rehab. So I think communication is important. But I think also the members, the Board of Selectmen should in fact be enthusiastic about meeting with the people. It's not them against us. You know, we're all in this together, and we better pull together, or else it isn't going to work.
Thank you. And Ms. Colarusso, how do you think you could help make the board more effective?
I just wanted to piggyback on what everyone else is saying a little bit. And if you look at the history, the board, not only did they become the Department of Public Works commissioners, they also are the sewer commissioners as well. And those two issues used to be handled differently. Regarding the Main Street project, I was on the DPW board at its final meeting. I think it was May of 2019. And I knew about the Main Street project way back then, but it was still far off at the time. So even when I heard the news that it was happening, I was also surprised. I think communication is key, and maybe using social media a little bit more, or offering coffee office hours, something like that, to kind of get in front of the people. In regards to the other board members, I look forward to working with them. I think they bring with them some great ideas, and we could work well together.
Thank you very much. What about the size of the board? Do you think that increasing the size of the board to 5 members would be beneficial and would distribute the workload more effectively to achieve more productivity? Or do you think the current size is actually more manageable and more efficient? Ms. Colarusso?
This one's tough. It depends. If you have 3 very dedicated personnel, can they do everything possible? I'm not sure. The way that Tisbury is structured, they have assumed a lot of responsibilities that it almost would be impossible to keep track of on a monthly basis. If they aren't interested in or if I could see it both ways, either maybe the sewer board goes to being an elected board and the select board stays a 3-person board, or maybe the select board goes to a 5-person board. But again, you need high quality candidates that are going to put in those hours and get face to face with the people they're representing.
Thank you. Ms. Burt, 3 or 5?
I agree. I think that I understand being a select board member, you can put as little or as much as you want into it. And we certainly need another member who's got the time to put a lot of hours into the job and be person to person, as Mr. Rose said. And you need people on the board that are willing to dive in, shall I say, to particular points, issues in the town, but the 5 main issues. And one of them is, of course, the DPW and sewer. And with 5 people, and you kind of could have a board member to be directly responsible, so to speak, for that. Or you could with 3. It's just, having not been on the board, I'm not sure how much each board member is aware and up to speed, so to speak, on the in-depth issues with things like either housing or sewer and septic or climate change. You can't be an expert on everything. It's important to have areas of expertise. And if you had 3 balanced members, it would work great. I don't know if we're ready for 5 or not. I'd have to think about that.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, do you have a view on the size of the board?
Well, stick with the same.
And Mr. Rose?
Yes, I do. Again, it's a tough situation because it seems that it's most voluntary time. I think if we had, let me preface it by saying I'd rather see it stay at 3, but I think it has to be the right 3. I think it takes more than being handed a folder an hour before a meeting and trying to be prepared to handle that meeting. Is going to take more time. I think the select board needs to be aware, the members or the people who are interested in it, that it does take a certain amount of time. Whether the town has to find a way to increase hours or to try to change what's required, I don't know, but I really wouldn't like to see it go to 5, because I fear that if it goes to 5 and you have 5 operating in a similar way now, by not having time to prepare for issues, it only makes it twice as hard. So I would love to see, as Ms. Burt mentioned earlier, some issues like the planning board that are made up of volunteers. We can only expect a certain amount from those. So maybe it's time to look at the selectmen, the select board, and their authority and power. Maybe they need more authority and power and less for these committees and boards. That's just one of my opinions.
Well, thank you all very much. You exhausted my list of questions. So I'm going to give you some time to make some final remarks and answer any questions I forgot to ask you. And look in terms of what goal you particularly would like to focus on when you start your service. And Ms. Burt, I'll start with you.
Well, I think this is an important time for the town of Tisbury with the issues that are in front of it. The new master plan, the climate, we've covered some of them tonight. Town hall, housing, septic, the tax rate, the taxes. I think the town has a lot of very important issues to be faced, and it needs some strong leadership. And it's a beautiful town and in a beautiful island, and I love it very much. And I believe that my business experience and municipal experience would be very helpful. And I'm also retired and ready to put in the time. I'd be honored to serve on the Board of Selectmen, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Campbell, would you like to make some final remarks and answer unasked questions?
Yeah, don't gamble, vote for Campbell.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rose?
Well, first, thank you for having this forum. I want the people to understand that when you vote on January 24th, you're voting because you care about the future of your town. But it's more than voting for a friend, a neighbor, a relative. Your vote should reflect your vision of Tisbury's future. Your vote should reflect your desire to have proven leadership in your town. Your vote should be for someone without self-interest. I will not make everybody happy all the time, but my decisions will be based on what's best for the town. As Assistant Deputy Superintendent with the Sheriff's Office, I had to make many tough decisions that affected people's lives on a daily basis. So I'm not afraid of being in that position. But you're responsible for putting the right person in this position by your vote. So vote Donald Rose. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Ms. Colarusso, final remarks?
I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. It was lovely to meet all of you. And it was great to talk to the candidates and learn more about where you are on the issues. I am invested in Tisbury, and I see a great future for our town. We have to keep our character intact and make sure that we do develop responsibly. Our waterfront is our gem, and we need to preserve it as much as we can. I have a track record of being a hard worker, and I will work hard for the taxpayers and town residents. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you all very much. And to the public, please don't forget to vote on January 24th. And if you watch this, but your friends have missed it, it will be available for streaming in a couple of days, both on the MVTV streaming service and on our website, which is leagueofwomenvotersmv.org. And I thank you all very much.